Title: The Cursed Feast. In a small, desolate town in the northern Cape, tucked between the arid mountains and endless plains, there was a restaurant that everyone seemed to love. It was called Koos's Kitchen, and it was owned by a man named Petrus Koos. Petrus was an unassuming man in his early 40s, with a calm demeanor and an infectious smile. His restaurant was famous across the region for its unbeatable stews and tender meat dishes. People would travel miles just to have a taste of his food. But behind the delicious meals and Petrus's kind eyes lay a secret so dark that no one could have imagined it. The secret ingredient. Petrus Koos wasn't just an excellent cook. He was also a practitioner of forbidden rituals passed down to him by his late grandmother, a notorious Sangoma known for her dealings in dark magic. While Petrus had inherited her charm and talent for cooking, he had also inherited her knowledge of witchcraft and the belief that spiritual energy could enhance flavors and bring immense wealth. Petrus's grandmother had once told him, "The essence of the dead is powerful. Their lingering energy can make anything irresistible, but the most potent of all is the energy of a woman in pain, her blood, her anguish. Mix that into your food, and no one will resist you." And Petrus took her advice to heart. The source of his wealth. The secret to Petrus's success lay in two horrifying practices. First, he would visit the local mortuary after hours. The mortuary caretaker, a man named Ezekiel, was an old friend of Petrus. Ezekiel had fallen on hard times and needed extra cash, so he didn't hesitate when Petrus offered him a deal. In exchange for a hefty sum, Ezekiel would provide Petrus with the water used to bathe dead bodies before burial. This water, which carried traces of the deceased's essence, was stored in large containers and delivered to the back of Petrus's restaurant under the cover of night. Petrus would then use this water to prepare his stews and soups, believing it infused his dishes with an otherworldly flavor that made his restaurant irresistible. But that wasn't all. Petrus also had an even darker source of magic for his cooking: used sanitary pads. Over the years, Petrus had learned to manipulate vulnerable women into providing him with what he needed. Some were desperate for money, others fell for his charm and sweet promises, and some didn't even realize what he had taken from them. He would collect the pads, boil them in secrecy, and use the concoction as a base for his most famous dishes. To Petrus, the menstrual blood carried immense spiritual energy, an ingredient he believed bound his customers to him, making them crave his food endlessly. The warning signs. People from the town adored Petrus's cooking, but not everyone was blind to the strange things happening around the restaurant. A young woman named Zandile, who worked as a waitress at Koos's Kitchen, started noticing unsettling patterns. Zandile often saw Petrus disappearing into the basement with strange containers, locking the door behind him for hours at a time. The smell that would waft out afterward was sickly sweet, almost metallic, and made her stomach churn. There were also rumors among the women in town. Some claimed that Petrus had approached them with peculiar requests, or had stolen personal items. One woman, Ayanda, confided in Zandile, saying, "I caught him going through my laundry once. I thought it was a mistake, but now I'm not so sure." Zandile's suspicions grew, but she kept quiet, fearing she would lose her job. The mysterious sickness. As Petrus's fame spread, so did strange occurrences in the town. Regular customers began to fall ill with unexplained symptoms. Some reported vivid nightmares of dead bodies reaching out to them, while others suffered from chronic fatigue and unexplained weight loss. One of the victims was a man named Thabo, who had been a loyal customer for years. After eating at Koos's Kitchen every day for months, Thabo started seeing shadows out of the corner of his eye. He claimed he could hear whispers at night, voices calling his name in the dark. Eventually, Thabo fell gravely ill, his body weakening until he could no longer leave his bed. As more people fell ill, whispers of witchcraft began to circulate. Some speculated that Petrus had made a deal with dark forces, but no one dared confront him. The discovery. Zandile's curiosity eventually got the better of her. One night, after closing, she decided to follow Petrus into the basement. She waited until he was distracted, then slipped through the door he had left slightly ajar. What she found inside made her stomach turn. Large vats of murky water lined the walls, each one labeled with a date. Floating in the water were remnants of soap and strange, unidentifiable substances. In the corner of the room, Zandile saw a pile of used sanitary pads, some still fresh. In the center of the room was an altar covered in animal bones and candles. Petrus had scrawled strange symbols on the walls, and a large pot simmered over a low flame, emitting the same metallic smell Zandile had noticed before. Panic gripped her as she realized the horrifying truth. She stumbled backward, knocking over a container. The noise alerted Petrus, who stormed into the basement, his face contorted with anger. "You shouldn't have come here, Zandile," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You've seen too much." The confrontation. Zandile tried to run, but Petrus caught her. He dragged her back into the basement and locked the door. "Do you know how much I've sacrificed for this?" he hissed. "This restaurant is my life. I've given everything to make it successful. You think you can ruin that?" But Zandile wasn't willing to give up without a fight. She grabbed a knife from the altar and lunged at Petrus, slashing his arm. He screamed in pain, and she used the opportunity to escape. Zandile ran to the police and reported everything she had seen. The authorities raided the restaurant the next day, uncovering the gruesome evidence in the basement. Petrus was arrested, but he refused to speak, only smiling eerily as he was led away. The aftermath, Koos's kitchen was shut down, and the town was left reeling from the revelations. Many of the sick customers recovered after the restaurant closed, but others were never the same. Zandile left the town, unable to shake the nightmares of what she had witnessed. She later learned that Petrus had died in prison under mysterious circumstances. Some said it was a heart attack, but others believed the spirits he had disturbed had finally claimed him. The restaurant remained abandoned, and locals swore they could hear whispers coming from inside at night. To this day, no one dares to enter Koos's kitchen, fearing the lingering curse of Petrus Koos and his unholy cooking. Even though Koos's kitchen had been shut down and Petrus Koos had met his mysterious end in prison, the darkness he had unleashed continued to linger over the town. The restaurant sat abandoned on the edge of the main street, its once vibrant sign faded and covered in dust. But locals swore that the building was far from empty. The ghostly presence. Strange occurrences began to plague the people who lived near the restaurant. At night, passers-by reported hearing pots clanging and knives scraping, as if someone was preparing a meal. Others claimed they could smell the metallic tang of stew cooking, even though the restaurant had been closed for months. Some swore they saw shadows moving inside, the outline of a man standing in the kitchen window. One night, an elderly woman named Mama Mokoena, who lived across the street, woke up to find a strange pool of water on her doorstep. The water was dark and murky, and its stench was unbearable. She tried to clean it, but no matter how hard she scrubbed, the smell lingered. The next morning, she fell gravely ill, coughing up black phlegm and muttering incoherently about the dead who still cook. Zandile's return. After leaving the town, Zandile had tried to move on with her life. She found work in a neighboring city, but nightmares of Petrus's basement continued to haunt her. In her dreams, she saw the vats of murky water boiling over, releasing ghostly figures into the air. She would wake up drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. One day, she received a call from an old friend in the town. "Zandile," the voice on the other end whispered, trembling with fear. "Something's happening at Koos's kitchen. People are getting sick. Strange things are happening. We think it's him. We think it's Petrus." Zandile didn't want to return, but she knew she had to. If Petrus's dark magic was still active, it could destroy the entire town. The discovery of the altar. Zandile returned under the cover of darkness, hoping to avoid drawing attention. Armed with protective herbs and a small charm given to her by a local sangoma, she made her way to the abandoned restaurant. The air around the building felt heavy, as if it were alive. The windows were grimy, but she could see faint flickers of light inside, like candles burning. Summoning her courage, Zandile broke the padlock on the front door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the metallic smell she remembered from Petrus's basement. The restaurant was in disarray, tables overturned, chairs scattered, but the kitchen was untouched, as if someone had been cooking there recently. In the basement, Zandile found the altar Petrus had used for his rituals. It was covered in dust, but the symbols etched into the walls seemed to glow faintly. The pots of murky water were gone, but a strange liquid seeped from the cracks in the floor, pooling in the corners. As Zandile inspected the altar, she felt a sudden chill. Behind her, she heard a familiar voice, deep, smooth, and dripping with malice. "You shouldn't have come back," it said. Petrus's spirit, Zandile, spun around to see the faint outline of Petrus's ghost. His once charming face was twisted with anger, his eyes glowing red. "You destroyed everything I built," he hissed, "but I'm not finished. My work will continue." Zandile clutched the charm in her hand, her heart racing. "You're dead, Petrus," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "You can't hurt anyone anymore." Petrus laughed, a low, chilling sound. "Death doesn't stop power. My magic lives on in this place, in the food they ate, in the water that flows through this town. As long as they remember me, I'll never truly be gone." Zandile realized that Petrus had tethered his spirit to the restaurant through his rituals. To banish him for good, she would need to destroy the altar and cleanse the building. But Petrus wasn't going to let her do it easily. The battle for the restaurant. As Zandile began scattering the protective herbs around the basement, Petrus's spirit grew more aggressive. The temperature in the room dropped, and the shadows seemed to come alive, clawing at her. She recited the incantation the Sangoma had taught her, but her voice trembled as Petrus's laughter echoed around her. "You think a few herbs can stop me?" he taunted. "I've fed on the energy of this town for years. I am more powerful than you can imagine." But Zandile refused to give up. She lit the candles she had brought with her and placed them on the altar. As the flames flickered, she poured a mixture of salt and ash over the symbols on the walls, chanting louder and louder. The room shook, and Petrus's screams grew louder, more desperate. Finally, with one last chant, Zandile smashed the altar with a heavy stone. The ground beneath her cracked open, releasing a blinding light that filled the room. Petrus's spirit howled in agony as it was sucked into the light, disappearing into the void. The restaurant fell silent. The aftermath. The next morning, the townspeople awoke to find Kusa's kitchen engulfed in flames. No one knew how the fire had started, but many believed it was the final act of Petrus's spirit being banished. The building burned to the ground, leaving nothing but ashes. Zandile left the town once more, this time feeling a sense of closure. She knew that Petrus's dark magic was finally gone, and the town could begin to heal. But the scars of his deeds remained. The townspeople who had fallen victim to his food would never forget the nightmares they endured, and whispers of Kusa's kitchen became a cautionary tale for generations to come. And on quiet nights, when the wind howled through the empty streets, some claimed they could still smell the faint scent of stew cooking, as if Petrus's ghost was lingering just beyond the veil, waiting for another chance to feast.